I'm feeling great. I've actually felt ridiculously good for several weeks. I've been back in the studio actually doing shows, even spinning the wheel, and nothing has popped. So I think it's okay.
At 77, Pat Sajak, the man who brought warmth and wit to Wheel of Fortune for over 4 decades, has finally said what fans have whispered for years. After spinning the wheel more than 8,000 times, Sajak is speaking plainly about what kept him going and what quietly pulled him away. Was it the grind, the fame, or something far more personal? In a recent emotional reflection, he opens up about the burden of expectations, the quiet doubts behind the smile, and the surprising truth about his time on America's most beloved game show. It's the confession no one saw coming. Early life and humble beginnings. Pat Sajak didn't grow up in Hollywood. He wasn't born into fame or fortune. He was born in Chicago in 1946 into a modest Polish-American household. His father worked in a factory, and money was often tight. Pat learned early on what it meant to earn your keep. After his father passed away when he was still young, life only became more challenging. But Sajak didn't complain. He watched, listened, and quietly dreamed. While attending Columbia College Chicago, he supported himself by working the front desk at the Palmer House Hotel. The job was nothing glamorous, checking in guests, hauling luggage, but it gave him discipline. He wasn't looking for shortcuts. At the same time, Pat was drawn to the radio. He entered a contest for a local station and won, earning a short stint as a guest teen DJ. That was the spark. The moment I put on those headphones, I knew, he later said, it just felt right. After college, he joined the U.S. Army in 1968. While serving during the Vietnam War, he became a disc jockey for Armed Forces Radio. His show opened every morning with the now famous line, "Good morning, Vietnam," a phrase he made his own, long before Robin Williams brought it to Hollywood. Broadcasting from a war-soiled zone taught him something no classroom ever could: how to speak to people in every circumstance, even in the worst of times. When he returned to the U.S., he started building his on-air career from the ground up. His break came at KNBC in Los Angeles, where he became a weatherman. He wasn't flashy or dramatic, but he had charm, quick wit, and a disarming smile. What started as small radio segments in Vietnam had turned into steady television work. But even then, Pat had no idea that the biggest turn of his life was just ahead. From a front desk clerk in Chicago to a radio host in a war zone, Pat Sajak had already lived a full life before most people ever see a spotlight. But in 1981, everything changed. One phone call, one audition, and one decision from a legendary producer would launch him into television history and introduce America to a brand new face of game shows. The unexpected call to Wheel of Fortune. In 1981, Wheel of Fortune creator Merv Griffin was looking for a new host. The original face of the show, Chuck Woolery, had stepped away after a contract dispute. Griffin had seen Pat Sajak doing weather on KNBC and was struck by his calm charisma. He wasn't loud, he wasn't rehearsed, he was genuine. Griffin knew he'd found his man. "That's the guy," he reportedly told NBC. "I want him." But NBC wasn't convinced. Executives pushed back. They didn't think Sajak had the star power to carry a game show that was already gaining steam. Griffin stood firm. He refused to pick anyone else. "Either it's Pat," he told them, "or there's no show." Eventually, the network relented. That gamble would turn into a 4-decade legacy. Pat stepped into the host's role with no ego and no assumptions. From the beginning, he brought a quiet charm to the stage. He didn't try to be the star. He let the contestants shine. That, ironically, made him a star. Audiences connected with his humor, his kindness, and his ability to make even the most nervous contestant feel at ease. When Vanna White joined him in 1982, the chemistry was instant. Together, they became the most beloved duo in game show history. In 1983, Wheel of Fortune expanded into evening syndication and exploded in popularity. Suddenly, it wasn't just a daytime show. It was on primetime TVs in millions of American homes. Pat Sajak had become more than a host. He was now a nightly guest in people's living rooms. The ratings soared, the wheel spun, and Pat never looked back. Pat Sajak's rise on Wheel of Fortune wasn't just lucky, it was earned. With every spin of the wheel, he built trust with the audience. But what no one expected was just how long that ride would last. Over the next 4 decades, Pat wouldn't just host a game show. He'd define an entire generation of American television. Building an iconic television legacy from 1981 to 2024, Pat Sajak hosted more than 8,000 episodes of Wheel of Fortune. It's a record few in television will ever come close to. His presence became so consistent that it felt timeless. Night after night, for over 40 years, viewers saw the same familiar smile, the same calm voice, and the same unwavering presence. In a changing world, Pat Sajak became something rare, reliable. Over the years, he earned multiple Daytime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Game Show Host. In 1994, he was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And in 2019, he set a Guinness World Record for the longest career as a game show host on the same show. But through it all, he never let it go to his head. "I just show up and do my job," he once said. "I'm lucky enough to love it." What made Pat unique was his restraint. He didn't need gimmicks or flash. He wasn't a comedian trying to steal the scene. He was a guide, smart, funny when it mattered, and always in control. His mission was simple: let the game be the star. And in doing so, he became a legend. Vanna White once said, "He's the calm in the middle of the storm. He's always steady, always present." Sajak's ability to keep the show lighthearted and family-friendly was part of its lasting appeal. Parents could watch it with their kids. Grandparents could watch it with their grandkids. And no matter the contestant, no matter the moment, Pat made it feel welcoming. In a world of noisy entertainment, he was a comforting voice. And for millions, that was more than enough. As the wheel kept spinning, Pat Sajak quietly made television history. But even as he became one of the most recognizable faces in America, he never stopped growing behind the scenes. Hosting a game show was just one part of his story. Because outside of the studio lights, Pat Sajak had ambitions, interests, and talents the audience rarely saw. Ventures beyond the wheel. While Pat Sajak was best known for spinning the wheel, his talents stretched far beyond the game board. In 1989, CBS gave him a shot at something new, a late-night talk show called The Pat Sajak Show. It was a bold move. Competing with Johnny Carson was no easy task. Pat gave it his best, bringing his trademark wit and poise to the stage. But the show only lasted a year. Still, it proved one thing: Pat wasn't afraid to take risks. Outside the world of talk shows, he dabbled in acting. He made brief appearances in shows like The King of Queens, and even lent his voice to animated programs like Rugrats. He wasn't chasing stardom, he was just having fun. "I'm not an actor," he once joked, "but I can play myself better than anyone." Writing was another passion. Pat penned columns for conservative publications like Human Events and contributed opinion pieces that showcased a thoughtful, reflective side of him rarely seen on TV. Whether you agreed with him or not, his writing was clear, calm, and intelligent, much like his on-screen persona. He knew how to speak without shouting, and he made his points without alienating readers. Pat also gave back. Though not one to flaunt his charity work, he quietly supported causes he believed in: education, veterans organizations, and children's hospitals. He believed in using success not just for comfort, but for contribution. And even as he remained grounded in television, he made time for appearances on other programs like Live with Regis and Kelly, where his charisma shone just as brightly. Even as he explored side projects and creative outlets, Pat always returned to Wheel of Fortune. It was home. But behind that consistent smile and smooth delivery, he was a family man at heart. The lights, the fame, the fanfare, it all took second place to one thing: the people he loved most. And that part of Pat's story was just as remarkable. Personal life and family values. Behind the cameras, Pat Sajak lived a life far quieter than the one he showed on television. In 1989, the same year he launched his talk show, he married photographer Leslie Brown. They kept their romance low profile, away from red carpets and magazine covers. Their relationship was built on trust and simplicity. Pat once said, "The secret is, we don't make it a spectacle." Together, they raised 2 children, Patrick and Maggie. Patrick chose a completely different path, eventually becoming a doctor. "He's the smart one," Pat proudly told a reporter. Maggie, on the other hand, stayed a little closer to the family business, appearing occasionally as a special correspondent on Wheel of Fortune. Both children were raised out of the spotlight, with Pat and Leslie fiercely protective of their privacy. Even with his success, Pat made it clear, family came first. When he wasn't filming, he was spending time with them, at home, on vacations, or simply enjoying a quiet dinner. He avoided the celebrity party scene and kept his circle small. It wasn't about image, it was about values. His steady marriage and close-knit. Family became a rare example in an industry full of public breakdowns and messy headlines. Though Pat is known for keeping his personal beliefs quiet, he didn't shy away from identifying as politically conservative. Occasionally, he would share opinions, usually through writing or subtle humor, but he always avoided turning Wheel of Fortune into a platform. "People don't watch to hear my politics," he said. "They watch to solve puzzles." Pat Sajak's devotion to family gave him grounding, but even the most grounded people face challenges. As the years passed and opinions changed, Pat's jokes didn't always land the same. The world around him evolved, and like many public figures, he found himself in a complicated space, where humor could quickly turn into controversy. Controversies and public perception. For most of his career, Pat Sajak avoided controversy. He wasn't scandalous, rude, or reckless, but in the age of social media, even a few words can spark fire. Pat, known for his sarcasm and dry humor, occasionally made headlines for tweets or comments that rubbed people the wrong way. A few remarks were seen as politically insensitive. Others, just a bit too sharp for modern taste. He faced criticism for joking about climate change, sharing politically conservative views, and poking fun at certain contestants in ways that seemed playful to some, but dismissive to others. While many fans shrugged it off as just Pat being Pat, others felt he was out of touch. The man once beloved for his warmth now faced accusations of being cold or cynical. And yet, through it all, he kept his seat. He responded to critiques in his signature way, lightly and with a shrug. "If I try to be funny and miss the mark, I apologize," he once tweeted. It happens. Unlike many in the spotlight, he didn't double down or lash out. He owned his missteps, kept the focus on the show, and let time do the healing. Despite the bumps, his fan base stayed strong. To many, he was still the same Pat, charming, funny, and relatable. His ability to weather criticism without creating further drama was almost an art. And perhaps that's why, even in changing times, he remained beloved. Because he never stopped being professional, and he never made the show about himself. Transition, 60 words. In a career spanning decades, Pat Sajak saw the culture shift around him. But no moment shook his world more than what came in 2019's. It wasn't a headline, a joke, or a ratings change. It was a sudden health scare that left him wondering if he'd ever return to the job or the life he loved so much. Health scares and resilience. In November 2019, Pat Sajak's world came to a sudden, terrifying stop. While preparing for a normal day of taping Wheel of Fortune, he began experiencing severe stomach pain. Within hours, he was rushed into emergency surgery for a blocked intestine, a condition that can be life-threatening if not treated immediately. It felt like someone had turned a switch, Pat recalled, and I just went black. Doctors acted quickly, and the surgery was successful, but the road to recovery wasn't easy. During his absence, the spotlight shifted to Vanna White, who stepped in as host for several episodes. Fans were shocked at Pat's sudden disappearance, and concern poured in from around the country. After nearly 4 decades of consistency, his absence was deeply felt. While recovering, Pat later admitted that at one point, he feared he might never return to the show. "My family was around me, and I started thinking, this might be the last time they see me," he shared. That moment changed him. He gained a deeper appreciation for life, health, and the people who mattered most. In many ways, the near-death experience gave him clarity that decades of television never could. When he returned to the set months later, fans welcomed him back with open arms. Though thinner and still recovering, he was smiling, grateful, and determined to keep going. "I try not to make too big a deal out of it," he said modestly, "but I definitely feel like I've been given a second shot." And just like that, the wheel kept turning. The health scare served as a wake-up call. Life doesn't always give you a warning, and Pat Sajak knew he was living on borrowed time. So when 2023 came around, and the opportunity to step back arrived, he made the decision no fan ever wanted to hear. But for Pat, it was finally time to walk away from the stage. The decision to retire. On June 12, 2023, Pat Sajak made it official. After more than 40 years of hosting Wheel of Fortune, he announced his retirement. The news, while not entirely unexpected, still hit fans hard. Pat said simply, "It's been a wonderful ride, but it's time." With that, he set in motion the final chapter of one of television's longest-running careers. The decision wasn't about ratings or health. It was personal. Pat had been thinking about it for years, especially after his 2019 surgery. He wanted to leave on his own terms, while he still loved the job and could do it well. "I'd rather step away a little too early than stay a little too long," he said in a press release. He emphasized the importance of spending more time with family. With both of his children grown and beginning their own careers, Pat wanted to be present, truly present, for the years that mattered most. He also hinted at other passions he wanted to explore, including writing, theater, and possibly more travel. For someone who had lived by a strict taping schedule for decades, the idea of freedom was deeply appealing. The announcement sparked an outpouring of tributes from co-stars, celebrities, and longtime viewers. People thanked him for the joy he brought, the calm he provided, and the legacy he created. Vanna White, who stood beside him through it all, said, "It's hard to imagine the show without him. He's my partner and my friend." And with those words, fans around the world began preparing to say goodbye. But retirement didn't mean the end. Before he stepped away, there was one more piece to the puzzle: finding someone to fill the iconic shoes. Who could possibly follow a legend? Who would spin the wheel with the same grace and charm? The answer came swiftly, ushering in a new era, with a familiar face ready to take the stage. Passing the torch. Just days after Pat's retirement announcement, the show confirmed who would take the reins: Ryan Seacrest. A television veteran in his own right, Seacrest was seen as a safe and seasoned choice. Best known for American Idol, he brought energy, experience, and a deep respect for what Wheel of Fortune represented. "I'm truly humbled," Seacrest said. "Pat is a legend." The decision to keep Vanna White on board offered comfort to longtime viewers. While Pat would be stepping down from his hosting duties, his presence would remain in spirit and, formally, behind the scenes. He agreed to stay on as a consultant for the show, helping to ensure a smooth transition and offering guidance when needed. "I won't be far," he promised. Pat himself spoke openly about the change. "Ryan's got the right touch," he said. "He understands that this show isn't about him. It's about the contestants. That's the key." It was a quiet endorsement, but a powerful one. Coming from Pat, it carried weight. Seacrest took it seriously, even calling Pat personally to thank him for paving the way. Fans' reactions were mixed, some excited, others nostalgic. But most understood the truth. This was the end of an era. The transition marked a passing of the torch from one generation to another. While many would miss Pat's unique brand of humor, there was hope that the game they loved would go on strong. As the studio lights dimmed on Pat's final season, fans wondered what life after Wheel of Fortune would look like for the man who defined it. But Pat wasn't done yet. With time now on his side, he stepped into new roles, on stage, on screen, and in life, ready to embrace a different kind of spotlight. Life after Wheel of Fortune retirement didn't mean vanishing from public life. In fact, Pat Sajak barely missed a beat. Even after stepping down from his hosting duties, he made it clear, "I'm not disappearing. I'm just stepping to the side." One of his first moves was returning to the spin-off show Celebrity Wheel of Fortune in 2025. Familiar setting, different pace, and this time, just for fun. Pat also made a surprising turn to the stage. That same year, he starred in the play Prescription: Murder at the Hawaii Theater. It wasn't a publicity stunt, it was genuine passion. He embraced the role with energy, trading spinning wheels for stage scripts. It reminded fans that Pat was, above all, a performer, one who still had more stories to tell. In interviews, he talked about finally having time for the little things: crossword puzzles, quiet dinners, visits with grandchildren. "I'm enjoying the stillness," he shared during a radio appearance. He also made occasional public appearances, smiling, relaxed, happy. The man who'd once taped 6 shows a day was now enjoying life one calm moment at a time. Still connected to Wheel, Pat continued to serve as a behind-the-scenes consultant. He offered input when needed and remained a quiet mentor to both Vanna White and Ryan Seacrest. His departure hadn't been a goodbye, it was more like a gentle handoff, and fans loved knowing he was still nearby, even if they didn't see him on screen every night. As he settled into this new rhythm, Pat began to reflect more openly. The decades behind him had brought fame, fortune, and friendships, but also lessons, challenges, and personal growth. Now, for the first time in years, he had the space to look back at it all, and the wisdom to appreciate the ride. Reflections on a storied career. Looking back, Pat Sajak couldn't help but feel amazed. What started as a weather gig turned into a 40-year chapter in American pop culture. In interviews, he often expressed one core feeling: gratitude. "I've had the honor of being part of people's daily routines," he said. "That's not something I take lightly. That's a real privilege." He spoke fondly of the show's unique place in American homes. Grandparents watched it with grandkids. Couples made it part of dinner. "It brought people together," Pat reflected. "And I'm proud of that." In a world often divided, Wheel of Fortune was something everyone could enjoy, something simple, comforting, and familiar. When talking about Vanna White, his praise was heartfelt. "She's not just my co-host," he said. "She's my friend." Their chemistry was never rehearsed. It was just real, and it endured. Through thousands of episodes, the duo never had a public fallout or dramatic split. They stood side by side, quite literally, through it all. Pat also reflected on the show's tone. He believed the key to Wheel's longevity was keeping it light, fun, and family-friendly. "We never tried to be trendy," he explained. "We just stayed true to what the audience wanted." That steady compass guided the show for decades, and Pat was proud to have kept it on course. But beyond the lights and the letters, Pat Sajak knew his influence extended further. He had become a blueprint for grace under pressure, a mentor, a role model, and a quiet giant in the world of entertainment. And while he never sought to be a teacher, his impact on the next generation of hosts was already clear. Mentorship and influence. As Pat stepped back, he didn't just leave a vacancy, he left a legacy. And part of that legacy was mentorship. Quietly and humbly, he began guiding newer hosts, including Ryan Seacrest, with the same steadiness that defined his own career. Stay humble, stay kind, and let the contestants shine, was his simple advice. That wisdom came from decades of lived experience. Seacrest publicly credited Pat for helping him navigate the early days on Wheel. "He didn't overwhelm me with instruction," Seacrest said. "He just gave me quiet confidence." For Pat, that was enough. He believed in leading by example, not through lectures. And that example inspired countless up-and-coming broadcasters and entertainers. Pat also began to speak more openly about professionalism in the industry. In a few select interviews and essays, he emphasized the value of consistency, gratitude, and humility. "Don't aim for stardom," he once told a young reporter. "Aim to do good work. If the stardom comes, let it be a byproduct." That grounded perspective resonated far beyond game shows. And while he didn't seek the title of TV icon, that's exactly what he became. Whether they were seasoned hosts or brand-new YouTubers, people in entertainment cited Sajak as a model of grace and endurance. He inspired more than just the next host. He inspired a generation to value clarity, warmth, and professionalism in a media world full of noise. The honors and accolades kept coming, but Pat never let them define him. What mattered more was how people remembered him as a person. And as he continued reflecting on his journey, he shared insights not often heard from celebrities about doubt, surprise, and the unpredictable path that led him to the longest-running job of his life. Public image and legacy. Over the years, Pat Sajak's image remained remarkably consistent. He was never caught in scandal, never subject to wild tabloid stories, and rarely made headlines for anything but his work. In a media landscape where even small mistakes can spiral, Pat stood out for his calm, his clarity, and his ability to rise above the noise. Fans remembered him for his wit. He was quick but never cruel, clever without being smug. He knew how to make people laugh without making them uncomfortable. That balance, rare in any setting, was part of what made him so beloved, and he never tried to be anyone else. "I'm just a guy who got very lucky," he often said. His accolades included multiple Emmy Awards, a Guinness World Record, and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But those were just symbols. His true legacy was emotional. He became a fixture in people's lives. Families gathered around the TV not just for the game, but because it felt good to see him. It felt normal. It felt like home. When people talked about Pat Sajak, they used words like steady, fun, reliable, and genuine. In a profession full of noise, he was the calm. In an era of viral moments, he was a legacy built one day at a time. And when the curtain began to fall, he left the stage just as he entered it, gracefully. Transition, 60 words. And yet, even with all the praise, Pat remained surprisingly candid about the journey. He didn't always expect success. He didn't always feel confident. And before the puzzle board, before the fans, before the fame, he had his doubts. What he revealed in his final reflections made him more relatable than ever. As the curtain gently falls on his legendary career, Pat Sajak leaves not with a bang, but with quiet grace, and a truth that hits home. He wasn't chasing celebrity. He was holding on to something real: stability, family, and purpose. His farewell isn't just the end of a game show, it's the closing of a cultural chapter. For over 40 years, he reminded us that comfort could be found in consistency, and joy in a simple puzzle. Now, at 77, with nothing left to prove, Pat Sajak steps away. Not because he had to, but because he finally wanted to.